All right, diving in today, folks. We're taking on something pretty profound, the Garuda Purana. This one comes straight from you, our listeners, and it's a text that tackles some seriously big questions. What happens after we die? What's the deal with karma, really? And is there any way to break free from this whole cycle of life and death and rebirth?
Yeah, no escaping those, are there?
Not really.
Yeah.
So our mission in this deep dive is to pull out the most fascinating and insightful ideas from this Shiv Official Podcast episode called Garuda Purana, Secrets of Death, Karma, and Liberation, and really look closely at what it says about the soul's journey after death, the mechanics of karma, and that really intriguing concept of moksha.
Big stuff.
Big stuff. But we're not just going for an abstract philosophical overview here. We want to see if we can find some practical wisdom in this, something that can help us live more meaningful lives right here, right now.
Absolutely. And what's so captivating about the Garuda Purana right from the get-go is its unique perspective. I mean, yes, it is a Vaishnava Purana centered around devotion to Lord Vishnu. It's actually narrated by him to Garuda, this mythical bird who is his mount.
His ride, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. But what really sets it apart is its intense focus on the afterlife. Like, other scriptures touch on it, sure, but the Garuda Purana really goes deep, providing these incredibly detailed, symbolic descriptions of what the soul experiences after it leaves the body.
So it's not just abstract philosophy. It's trying to paint a picture of this journey we're all going to take eventually.
Precisely. It's like a guidebook, in a way, to the great unknown.
I like that, a guidebook. And the way it's structured seems pretty significant too, right?
Absolutely. You have the Purvakhanda first, and this part is broad, covering everything from cosmology, the creation of the universe, Dharma, the principles of righteous living, even insights on health, rituals, yoga, philosophical concepts, you name it, it's probably in there.
Wow, a real grab bag.
Right. But then you get to the Uttarakhanda, and this is where things shift. The focus becomes the post-death experience. You have the funeral rites, the soul's path, the intricate workings of karma, and descriptions of all these different realms, including, well, those that are often called hells.
Hells, yeah. And for our exploration today, we'll be primarily sticking with the themes within that Uttarakhanda, the second part.
Right.
Looking at this journey after death and, more importantly, what it might tell us about how we should live our lives now.
Exactly.
Okay, so let's get right into it. When someone dies, what's the immediate experience for the soul, according to the Garuda Purana? What did the podcast highlight about those initial moments?
Well, they brought up this fascinating idea about this initial stage. The belief is that the soul, now existing in this subtle body, think of it like an energetic blueprint of who you were, it doesn't just immediately depart. It actually lingers near the physical body for 13 days.
30 days?
Yeah. And during this time, it's said to experience sensations like hunger and thirst and a really strong pull, almost an attachment to the life it's just left behind.
Wow, that's heavy. So it's still connected in a way.
Exactly. And this is why those rituals, the Shraddha and Pindan, performed during this 13-day period, are considered so important. They're seen as ways to support the soul, to help it gradually release those lingering attachments and begin its onward journey.
So they're not just for the living, they're for the soul itself.
Precisely.
Okay. And then after these 13 days, the podcast mentioned a longer journey that unfolds, a 48-day passage. What happens during this time?
Right. So the Garuda Purana talks about this 48-day journey where the soul moves through what's called pret-yoni, kind of an intermediate state, and various other planes of existence.
Sort of like a waiting room.
Yeah, in a way. But think of it more as a time of intense review. The podcast describes it as this period where the soul witnesses a playback of its own karma. Every action, every thought, every word from its life is brought into focus. It's all being evaluated, you could say, by Chitragupta.
And who is Chitragupta?
He's like the celestial record keeper, Yama's scribe.
Yama, the god of death.
Exactly.
So it's like your entire life becomes this data set that's being analyzed.
Got it.
I see. But, something the podcast touched on that really surprised me was how the Yamadutas were portrayed. These are the messengers of death, right?
Right.
They weren't the terrifying figures I've always imagined.
Yeah, that's interesting, isn't it? The podcast made a point of emphasizing that the Garuda Purana depicts the Yamadutas not as these scary demonic beings, but as these calm, impartial, just messengers.
Really? So they're not there to punish or anything?
It seems not. It's more about maintaining order, ensuring a smooth transition. And what I find fascinating is that this perspective really shifts the focus away from fear.
Yeah, that makes sense.
It's not about arbitrary terror. It suggests there's a sense of order and justice in this whole process, a natural flow of things.
Okay, so this whole journey seems to be deeply intertwined with karma, right?
Absolutely.
And the podcast really emphasized that karma isn't just this simple equation of good deeds versus bad deeds leading to reward or punishment.
Right. It's more fundamental than that.
Like a universal law woven into the fabric of reality.
Yeah, exactly. The Garuda Purana presents karma as this inherent principle, this universal currency, you could say, where every action, whether it's driven by good intentions or selfish desires, generates a consequence.
So there's no escaping it.
It seems not. And as the podcast host pointed out, the point isn't to scare us into being good. It's more about awakening to the interconnectedness of our actions and their consequences, both in this life and beyond. It's about recognizing that we have agency, that our choices matter.
And they even shared a story to illustrate this, the story of Satyapal. Can you remind us of the key elements there?
Oh, yes. The story of Satyapal. This is a great example of the Garuda Purana's nuanced view of karma. So you have this wealthy man, Satyapal, and he's doing all these acts of charity, which on the surface seem like good karma, right?
Sure, giving to others, that's good.
You'd think so, but his motivation was all wrong. It was rooted in ego, a desire for praise and recognition. And according to the Garuda Purana, after his death, he ends up in this realm called Tamisra Naraka.
Sounds unpleasant.
Yeah, it's not presented as a place of punishment exactly, more like a state where that specific quality, that arrogance, is addressed. Through introspection, self-reflection, and yes, maybe some suffering. It's not about retribution, it's about growth.
It's about facing the consequences of your actions, even the internal ones.
Exactly.
And it makes you think about your own motivations, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Like, why are we doing the things we do?
Absolutely. It's a powerful reminder that our inner world is just as important as our outward actions.
For sure. And on the flip side, the Purana also describes these heavenly realms, the Swarga-lokas, for those who live with different intentions, right?
Oh, yes. The Swarga-lokas. The podcast described them as these radiant, blissful realms inhabited by souls who lived in accordance with Dharma.
Dharma, right, living righteously.
Exactly. With compassion, devotion, that sense of bhakti. And in these realms, the consequences are experiences of light, peace, harmony. It's really a vision of what's possible when we align ourselves with those positive principles.
So it's a balance. Actions have consequences, both positive and negative. But the ultimate goal, as the podcast discussed, is to move beyond this whole cycle of karmic reactions to achieve moksha.
Right, right.
So what exactly is moksha in this context?
Moksha is presented as the ultimate liberation. Freedom not just from suffering, but from the entire cycle of birth, death, and rebirth. It's a complete transcendence of the karmic framework, a realization of our true nature that goes beyond any kind of temporary reward or punishment.
It's like stepping off the wheel entirely. And how does the Garuda Purana, at least as discussed in the podcast, suggest we can move towards this state of moksha? What are the paths, the practices?
Well, they highlighted several key aspects: living with awareness in the present moment, cultivating detachment from desires and outcomes, fostering a deep sense of devotion, engaging in self-inquiry, really questioning and trying to understand the nature of our true self.
So it's not a passive thing. It requires effort.
Oh, absolutely. It's an active process of inner transformation.
Right.
And they mention specific practices like satsang, which is associating with truth and wise individuals, seva, selfless service, japa, the repetition of mantras, dhyana, which is meditation, and viveka, the development of discernment and wisdom.
So many tools in the toolkit.
Right. And these are all presented as tools that can help us loosen the grip of the ego and ultimately realize our connection to something much larger than ourselves.
And I remember the podcast using a really thought-provoking analogy to explain this idea of life being like a dream. Can you unpack that a bit?
Yes, the dream analogy, it's a powerful one. They suggested that our everyday experiences with all of the ups and downs, the joys and sorrows, all of it, it's all like a dream.
So none of it's really real.
Well, it's real in the sense that we experience it,
Yeah.
but from the perspective of moksha, the true awakening lies in recognizing our true self, the Atman, which is beyond these temporary dreamlike experiences.
So the goal is to wake up.
Exactly. It's not just about having pleasant dreams, it's about realizing the true nature of reality.
That's profound.
Well,
And all of this, it feels so relevant even in our modern world, where the focus is often on the tangible, the immediate.
oh, absolutely. And I think that's what makes this ancient wisdom so powerful. In a world driven by material pursuits and instant gratification, the Garuda Purana reminds us that those things are fleeting. It encourages us to think about the bigger picture, the deeper meaning of our lives.
To live more consciously, to be more aware of our actions and their consequences.
Exactly.
And the podcast even mentioned the Garuda Purana as a kind of spiritual psychology. What did they mean by that?
Well, they were pointing out that even if someone doesn't believe in reincarnation or an afterlife, the core principles of the Garuda Purana can still provide a framework for ethical living.
It's a way to live a good life, regardless of your beliefs.
Right. The emphasis on consequences, even if those consequences are experienced in this lifetime, the importance of our intentions, the value of qualities like compassion and detachment, these are all timeless principles that can guide us towards a more meaningful and fulfilling life.
I see. And they also brought up some connections to modern science, things like near-death experiences.
Oh, yes. They pointed out some interesting parallels between what's described in the Garuda Purana, things like the experience of light, the sense of being outside the body, even the life review, and temporary accounts of near-death experiences.
So there might be some overlap between ancient wisdom and modern science.
Potentially.
Hmm.
It's not proof of anything, but it raises some fascinating questions about the nature of consciousness and reality. And maybe these ancient texts hold insights that we're only now beginning to explore through different lenses.
Maybe so. So as we wrap up here, what would you say is the main takeaway, the core message of the Garuda Purana, at least as it was explored in this podcast episode?
I think it's the profound impact of our actions and intentions. These are not just fleeting things. They have consequences that extend beyond our physical existence, shaping our journey in ways we may not fully grasp.
So we need to be mindful.
Absolutely. The Garuda Purana encourages us to live with more awareness, to cultivate detachment from the material world, and to nurture self-awareness as the path to a more liberated and meaningful existence.
And what does that mean for our listeners, for their everyday lives?
Even if the details of the afterlife remain a mystery, the principles of karma, of cause and effect, and the pursuit of a life lived with intention and purpose, these are things we can all apply right now. By paying attention to our motivations, by understanding that our actions have ripple effects, we can make more conscious choices, cultivate better perspectives, and ultimately live lives that are richer, more meaningful, and more fulfilling.
That's a powerful message. So as a final thought for our listeners, considering the Garuda Purana's perspective, this idea of the soul's journey as a dream unfolding, I want you to ask yourself, what aspects of your current dream, your present life, deserve your closest attention, and what would it mean for you to awaken more fully to the potential for meaning and purpose right here, right now?
What would it mean, indeed?
That's something to think about.
It is.